Hello, everybody. So today I wanted to talk about Donald Trump's latest lawsuit about trying to get back onto Facebook and YouTube. I think it might also include Instagram. Now, for a little bit of background, he's currently permanently banned from those places, or I think a couple of them have now reduced it to 2 years. So he's facing a significant ban, and he's looking at having that ban removed. Now, the reason given for why he was banned was because of the US Capitol riot, I guess is the right word, that happened on, I think it was the 6th of January this year. And so they claimed that what he did was illegal, or at least against their terms of service. Now, this was actually tested in Parliament, not in court, but in Parliament, because as an elected official, he's not allowed to be charged. Certainly not as president. So they have this thing called impeachment. And so what happens in the impeachment is that, first of all, they vote in the House of Representatives as to whether they think that there's enough evidence to go ahead with the trial. So that's effectively the equivalent of a committal hearing in a criminal court. So he got enough votes, and they had what they call impeached, which effectively means that they go ahead with the proper trial. After the proper trial, they voted in the Senate, and he was found not guilty in the Senate as far as the votes were concerned. So therefore, we can say, as far as that sort of trial is concerned, he was found not guilty. Now, of course, the other side will say, well, actually, just being impeached makes him guilty. Perhaps it depends on which side of politics you're on. But from a legal point of view, he was found not guilty. Now, obviously, that's not the same criminal proceeding as you would have if it was a criminal trial, and he may have been found guilty in a criminal trial. It's sort of irrelevant to look over the evidence of that. I mean, you can say that yes, a number of the people who went into the Capitol were charged, and as far as I know, some of them, maybe all of them, have been or will be found guilty. But that's not the same thing as saying that he's guilty of asking them to go in. He didn't say, oh, here you go, here's some things, go in there. And to put the significance of that in there, that was when they were voting to ratify Joe Biden as president. And this is because, according to US laws, after a vote, it's then up to the politicians to ratify that vote, and they can go the other way. They're allowed to. And, of course, that goes back to the electoral fraud thing. Now, once again, I want to say that the US election was, by world standards, fraudulent. By US standards, however, it was perfectly fine, because the US, how they do elections, has, at least since 2000, when I've been following it, always been fraudulent. 2016 was a fraudulent election that went in Trump's favour, and it was well publicised that it was fraudulent. They called it Russian interference, and so it's not always one side, and we have different states do the wrong thing all the time. And the solution, obviously, is to have a nationwide, sort of like a nationwide decision on how to run elections. So then they don't have that. So instead of having a nationwide way that, we've all got to vote in person, or you can all vote remotely, or these are the rules for when you can vote remotely. They leave it up to the individual states, and individual states make it very different, and it becomes quite corrupt. And certainly I think that there's avenue to fix that up, because I think that it does in a lot of cases decide certainly state elections and potentially the entire election. Now, I analysed that, and I thought that even in spite of the fraud at that level, Biden would have still won, even if we assume that Pennsylvania did the wrong thing, Minnesota, I can't remember which states they were, Wisconsin, I think, was another one. We also had Texas doing the wrong thing the other way. So we had a fair bit of fraud. And it's really quite disappointing that he brought that to people's attention to a higher level than was brought in any previous election. But it was dismissed as unproven, not even unproven, but fraudulent. That it was fraudulent that he said that they were proven false allegations, and they were never proven false. This was not reaching the threshold. And once again, people are saying, well, he was never found not guilty of storming the Capitol. So, and I think we've got to say from the same perspective, there certainly were, I mean, Texas, as the entire state, said, yes, it was a fraudulent election. And there were, I believe, 9 other states that went forward with that. So, I mean, we've got a difference between being proven in a court of law to a certain level and being disproven. And this hasn't been disproven. It hasn't been proven in a court of law to the extent that is required. And that's a similar way to how we can say with Trump, he was found not guilty in that impeachment process, but perhaps there's an argument to say, well, he was actually guilty. And I think I've gone over this before, that it did look in a lot of ways, not as an attempted coup, but as a testing the waters to see if he would succeed with the coup. And I think that the argument is that he probably would. He probably would have succeeded with a coup had he called for people to do a coup. And if he was doing that now, there's every chance that he would succeed and be put in place as a president. And I think that's what a lot of people are scared of. They don't want to see him in power. Now, you might say, well, a coup, that's not legal. Well, actually, by international standards, it is. There are parts of the world which have leaders who got in power from military coups, and they're still in power. And those people are in democracies. So we have that sort of process where at a world level, it is legal. So we then have to sort of look at that. Okay. I'm just going to take Facebook, for example. I mean, I spend more time on Facebook than on other platforms. I don't really use Twitter. And I'm not on here on that much on YouTube. So more watching videos than taking part in the whole everything. So we've got to look at that and say, okay, so were they allowed to do that? Now, certainly for most of his time as president, and in fact before he was president, they didn't moderate things, and they all had a policy, well, you're an elected official, we're going to just let you do things because the laws support that. And so arguably from that point of view, they had no right to get rid of him. Now, they also got rid of president of Nigeria was banned at one point, and he responded by banning, it was Facebook or Twitter or whatever it was, in the whole country in response to a ban which was supposedly for spreading misinformation. And so they're now of that policy that, well, actually, we're not caring about the laws surrounding that. We're no longer going to allow information that we disagree with. I'm not going to call it misinformation because there's a whole thing about that. We'll say information that they disagree with. They're not going to allow that. They're going to ban people for that, and they're not going to care if they're an elected official or not. Now, legally, they should care if they're an elected official or not, because, again, an elected official can't be tried in court, and they have to go through this impeachment process. And certainly if you have Facebook saying, well, we think that he was guilty, even though the impeachment process found him not guilty, that's essentially Facebook saying that they get to make their own laws, and they don't get to make their own laws. So they can make their own laws within the law, but they can't make them by themselves. So they can't sort of say, oh, look, we're more important, that we get to do what we want. They don't get to do that. So, and even if it is every social media company, blah, 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 they're still not allowed to do it. So there is that perspective. There's a fact that he was actually found not guilty in the Senate trial. Had he been found guilty, they would have been allowed to do this. And of course, had he not been an elected official, it would have been a different situation. So the other thing is, there's the claims that there was bias. And now, if we look at the running of the 2020 elections and we look at the Hunter Biden laptop situation, that was banned from Facebook and Twitter, and we had whole accounts that were banned permanently for posting a single link about it. So, and that was certainly partisan politics. That was only one side of politics that happened to. And once again, while technically that wasn't fraudulent for them to do that, it certainly changed the outcome of the election. And I think they have done opinion polls since that election, and they've worked out that had they not put those bans in place and had people been exposed to that information, a significant number of people would have changed their vote, either from Democrat to Republican, or at least from Democrat to nothing, enough that it would have almost certainly given Trump the election. And that's a separate issue in a lot of ways to the fraudulent aspects, where different states did the wrong thing. We also have Facebook and Twitter manipulating the election, and I think we can say that was proven. I think we can say yes, they most certainly did that, and that most certainly had that outcome. So I think from a legal point of view, that's not difficult to argue. Now, was that their intention, or did they legitimately believe that was false information? Well, if that's the thing. So they're not required to do that. They're not required to remove false information. What they're required to do is to remove things that are criminal, things that perhaps somebody's saying, oh, I'm going to commit a murder, or even live streaming murders, which we've seen. They're the things that they're required to remove, or people setting up pedophile rings or terrorist activities. They're not required to remove things that might not be true. And yet we've seen in the last few years that has been what they have been doing. And they've even put in what I might call bots, which are, they put in computer programs that automatically ban you for certain words or phrases. So essentially the same as if you were swearing, they have put in bans on your entire account for not swearing, but for certain combinations of words. And they've said, oh, they did that because they don't have enough staff. And a lot of those combinations of words have been related to the right side of politics, so the Republicans. So there's certainly significant evidence that is what they're doing. I mean, I found myself with some bot bans myself, not for user-reported content, not for anything that anybody's actually looked at, but for things that a computer program has said were wrong. Now, are they allowed to do that? I mean, I don't think I've got any right to sue them over it, but certainly if you had a class action thing, yes, there is scope to sue them, to say, well, this is discriminatory. Yes, you're a private place that you can decide who comes in or not, but you also can't do it in a discriminatory fashion. And I think we can certainly say that, I mean, we're not having false information on the left side of politics being banned. That's not happening. And I certainly am not aware of any of that. And I guess, yes, they are banning people just for random robots. And I guess that's the thing. Are the bans more on the right or more on the left? And certainly as someone that's not more central like me, I'm certainly seeing that any content I put up that is more on the left doesn't get banned. I've never had any of that banned. But content that's even central is at risk of being banned, and any content that's on the right is much more likely to get banned. So I think that there is certainly a scope to argue that is the reason for it. Now, of course, again, if you say, well, if Biden asked for the people to be storming the Capitol, would they get banned? Well, you know, that hasn't happened. So we can't necessarily say that, but I guess you can say, well, Hillary Clinton called for Julian Assange to be killed and different things like that. So, but there was a different policy in place then when they were allowing elected officials to do whatever they wanted. So you do have a little bit difficult to argue, but I certainly think that there is scope to win this. I'm not going to predict that he's going to win it, because some people have said, well, you know, they've won similar lawsuits previously, and, you know, it's pretty easy to say that they're allowed to do it. So, look, it's difficult to say that he would definitely win. But I certainly think there's scope for him to win. And I think in a lot of ways he should win. I think it'd be the right thing to do. And I think that if the court was looking at what they should be doing, I think that the right thing to do for the health of the internet, for the health of the USA, for the health of the world, the right thing to do is to remove the ban. And so I think from that point of view, regardless of the legal arguments, I think that he should win. Now, whether he will, it's hard to argue because this is new ground. This is something that hasn't been tried before. They might not, and it could get complicated. But I think that the basic part where he was banned for the Capitol building riots and was found not guilty in the Senate, and being an elected official, not being able to be charged and all that kind of thing, I think that we'll find that that is sufficient evidence to say they can't ban him. They could ban him, like suspend him, pending the outcome. But then when the outcome found him not guilty, they needed to release that suspension. But also, I think generally their policy where they didn't interfere with elected officials, not just Trump but anyone, was the right policy. See, the damage is caused by the terrorists, the pedophiles, all that sort of stuff, not by elected officials. Elected officials need to have a voice, more even than everyday people. And whichever side of politics they're on, they need to be able to say what they're going to say, even though, yeah, we know a lot of it's going to be false. But that shouldn't be the deciding factor on whether or not they can speak. I mean, sometimes, people say things that are complete nonsense, but they still should be allowed to say it. And it's important that they say it. We should be equally able to call them out and they're nonsense. And yeah, for an elected official, look, absolutely, he shouldn't have been banned. I think that was the wrong thing to do. And it should be restored. And I think it's really obvious that it should be restored. Now, whether a court will do the right thing is another matter entirely. I'd like to think that they would. I can't guarantee that they will. Again, this is all unprecedented. This hasn't really been tested before. Certainly, we do have similar cases where the court said, well, they're allowed to ban who they want. But I don't think that guarantees that the ban will be upheld in court. I think that we'll find that in court, they will look at the broader picture and they'll be looking at, well, is this damaging? And I think they'll likely conclude that it is damaging for him to be banned. And so I think that you'll find that he'll be put back. Now, perhaps that's a prediction. Can't guarantee it. I think it might be quite a close thing. Again, I was disappointed when the various courts did not find that there was significant electoral fraud. I thought that was an opportunity for the courts to do the right thing and to help to fix the electoral process in the United States. And also I was disappointed, and I guess I had predicted there that I thought that the courts would find that there was fraud. Not that it changed the outcome of the election, and perhaps that was the tipping point, if you like. But I was disappointed with them there, and it may well be that I'll be disappointed with them again here. But look, it certainly, I think this would, if it was found that it was reversed, I think that would be significant, and I think they know that would be significant. And I guess that might be an argument for why they wouldn't do it, because they might say, well, this is too big a thing. So, and this is perhaps the wrong case to be making that. And that might be an argument that the courts will make to sort of say, well, let's not do it. It's certainly a difficult thing to be sure about what will happen. I think there's an argument either way, that he could have the ban overturned or stay banned. It's not an open and shut case. It's not It's not something where you can say, well, he'll definitely be restored. This has happened a million times before. It's untested. But we also can't say, oh, he'll definitely stay banned. Because, again, it's untested. Perhaps we can say, well, if we assume that he's the same as other normal people, ban will stay in place. But, again, because he was an elected official and because the laws are different for them, I think that's not necessarily it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what will happen. I mean, I just got banned today or yesterday from Facebook. I got a 24-hour ban because I said to someone, stop being so sexist. And you might say, that's ridiculous. Surely the person that's being sexist should be banned. And that was a bot ban. Nobody reported that. That was just the second I posted it. It said, stop being so sexist. I was banned. And it's quite unfair, quite ridiculous. It says on my profile, I've got a little warning there. To go with the other one they had for the other bot ban. I've got warnings on my YouTube profile for posting things that there was nothing wrong with the content, but had the words that they didn't want to see. I'm not even allowed to say on YouTube what they were. But, is that censorship? Yes, of course it is. Is that stupid? Of course it is. Is it illegal? So that's a different thing. Are they allowed to ban me for telling someone to stop being sexist? Essentially, yes. See, because they're not discriminating against me by saying that. It's not like, oh, only people on the right side of politics can say that someone's sexist or can say that someone's doing the wrong thing. It's arguably really terrible that they're doing things like that. Very arbitrary, and particularly because it's done by robots, not by people. And, they certainly shouldn't be banning people with robots. Of course, that's not what happened with Trump. But I think that if we look at the consequences, if Trump's ban is removed, then I think the consequences will be that, I'm going to go,